Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Joan Melendez. I'm the president of Xcelrate UDI, where we specialize in delivering innovative solutions, technology, and workforce automation that helps staff, hospitals, and surgery centers significantly improve patient safety and regulatory compliance with medical devices, biologics, consumables, and drugs. Today's webinar will focus on a foundational shift that profoundly impacts how hospitals manage risk, ensure patient safety, and maintain compliance. Today, we will discuss ISO 13485, the new QMSR alignment, and hospitals must know, evaluate, and enforce going forward. If you have any questions as we go through today's presentation, please jot them down in the chat or use the Q&A feature. We will reserve time at the end we will reserve time at the end to answer any questions you may have. So let's get started. When it comes to medical devices, biologics, drugs, and consumables, there are three FDA regulating bodies. There's CDRH, the Center of Device and Radiologic Health, which regulates medical devices and medical devices containing HCTP, implantable tissues or cells. Next, there's CBER, the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, which regulates biologics and tissues, and CDER, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, which regulates drugs. Each of these centers has its own regulations around labeling, which includes the documentations hospitals and surgery centers rely on, the IFUs, the manuals, the reprocessing instructions, and related controlled content. Additionally, we will be discussing ISO 13485, which is a global standard of quality management for the design and manufacture of medical devices, and QMSR, which is the updated framework for regulating the quality management systems of medical devices and for the manufacturers in the United States. Our focus today will primarily be around CDRH, specifically around the upcoming adoption of the new QMSR and its alignment with ISO 13485, and how it impacts medical devices, instruments, equipment, and related consumables. However, it's also important to remember that documentation and labeling requirements that affect how to handle and use products can fall under three departments: CBER for biologics, CDER for drugs, CDRH for medical devices, and in cases can fall under multiple departments. Our goal is to bring to hospital staff, and that includes our infection prevention, our quality control, supply chain, central processing, patient care and procedures area staff, anyone who touches a medical device, medical equipment, a consumable, biologic, or drug into the same conversation about documentation quality, traceability, and regulatory expectations under this new aligned framework. On February 2nd, 2026, current quality standards transitions from the historical Quality Standards Regulation, or QSR, into the new Quality Management System Regulation, or QMSR, that is aligned with ISO 13485. The legacy QSR was a US-centric framework with limited emphasis on structured risk management and lifecycle accountability. With the new QMSR aligned to ISO 13485, again, a global regulation, the expectation for documentation and labeling are significantly elevated. Documentation is now clearly treated as a regulated, controlled output. That includes the manuals, IFUs, again, reprocessing instructions, our assembly and disassembly steps, and any other written documentation or directions that accompany a medical device or equipment. Labeling and documentation must be accurate, current, and validated. All medical devices are required to have a unique device identifier, a UDI, and that UDI must be correctly registered with the FDA's Good ID. Certain consumables and patient purchase products can continue to use a UPC when they meet FDA criteria, but devices under CDRH are expected to carry UDIs. And that's important for us. And it's critically for manufacturers are expected to work directly with their customers to correct and improve documentation when issues are identified. This is not optional under the quality systems built on ISO 13485. Here we're outlining how QMSR aligned with ISO 13485 raises expectations across documentation quality and accessibility, UDI, good ID data accuracy, labeling, again, including those important reprocessing validation, our post-market surveillance, and complaint handling. One very practical point is around post-market surveillance and complaints. In Xcelrate UDI's platform, our clients don't have to reinvent the wheel to report a device issue. They can select the device directly in our platform, apply the appropriate IMDRF term, and the documentation of the complaint or device failure or contamination is generated in seconds. That single action supports FDA expectation, manufacturer required processes, and the hospital's internal quality review. And it does so in a way that is structured, standardized, and traceable. Staff in sterile processing, infection prevention, and even clinical leaders have seen for years outdated IFUs, incomplete IFUs and steps, contradictory instructions, and documentation that is not clinically usable. Those are not minor annoyances under ISO 13485 and QMSR. Those are regulatory gaps. The quote on the slide from an SPD leader saying that they've seen bizarre IFUs and are uncomfortable using a device until revised IFU is provided is exactly the mindset regulators expect. People often ask, are manufacturers penalized for this? And unfortunately, there isn't a strong direct penalty structure solely for a bad IFU, but that doesn't mean we accept them as is. Together as hospitals and partners, we hold manufacturers accountable by identifying the gaps, documenting them, and requesting corrected, validated instructions. And in all the work we've done, there have only been a small handful of manufacturers, literally just a few, that consistently resist making correction. The vast majority will fix documentation when we anchor the discussion in FDA and ISO requirements, and of course, staff satisfaction and patient safety. ISO 13485 and QMSR aligned utilizes a risk-based approach, global harmonization, traceability, and FDA access for records. ISO 13485 embeds risk management throughout the device's life cycle, from design and manufacturing to labeling, documentation, traceability, and post-market activities. It is important to note that risk management is not just the manufacturer's activity. Hospitals are also part of the risk management and outlined in the federal registration and medical device regulations. Most IFUs include some language about risk, but hospitals are the ones who can see whether those instructions are actually achievable at the point of care or during cleaning or reprocessing. When a step is missing, contradictory, or unrealistic, it's a risk signal. Identifying those signals and escalating them back to the manufacturer is part of the hospital's contribution to risk management. Global harmonization and increased FDA access to quality records means that what we do locally now sits within a global, auditable quality framework, with UDI-based traceability playing a central role in linking development, instructions, labeling, and patient exposure. Ultimately, staff must be able to follow current validated and complete manufacturer documentations for ordering to handling, reprocessing, storage, and use. If the IFU is missing, incomplete, contradictory, or not achievable, the device should not be placed into use. And if it's already in circulation, it must be removed from use until a compliant IFU is obtained. That includes devices being used for the first time in the US market. The correct response is not to figure it out locally, but to stop, then escalate to the manufacturer and at times to the FDA, and then obtain validated instructions before using the device again. Let's put into context of a non-compliant process, and I want to tie it to a real example. In one case, we identified a missing dry time for a device in the IFU, which is an automatic stop on reprocessing for our client. The referring department wanted the reprocessing done, so they called another hospital and asked, "What dry time do you use?" And that hospital said, "Well, we dry for 15 minutes. This is a great example of a non-compliant process. Calling another facility is not following the IFU and does not meet regulatory expectations. We had already started working this IFU gap directly with the manufacturer on the hospital's behalf, and we found out the device had never been fully tested for sterilization, which is required under applicable standards in ISO 13485. The manufacturer then completed the proper testing, validated the process, and updated their documentation with appropriate tested instructions, including drying parameters. Only then was this device ready for compliant use. And for transparency, this did restrict the device's use for 5 weeks. We also encourage, and our clients have implemented, contract modifications that introduce penalties when manufacturers fail to provide adequate documentation or ship products within very short remaining shelf lives. Hospitals don't want devices or on their shelves, and they don't want shelves full of items that expire within a few months when the product has a 5 or a 10-year shelf life. With the right contract language, hospitals can reject short-dated product or inadequate IFUs and apply financial penalties or rebates defined in the modified agreement. We further require our clients to have manufacturers add our company, Xcelrate UDI, to all recall and safety notification distribution lists, so that recalled information and safety notices are addressed and integrated into real-time workflow instead of relying only on notification days or weeks later. It is important to understand here that recall alert companies are not notified by the manufacturer, but will rely on their hospital clients to add notifications. The FDA is typically at minimum 97 days behind a manufacturer's initiation of a recall. Let's broaden the perspective beyond sterile processing. When we talk about clinical and support teams, we really mean anyone who touches a medical device, a dental device, equipment, or a consumable. That includes all patient care and procedure areas, ambulatory surgery centers, outpatient clinics. Every one of those team members rely on manufacturer documents or documents being accurate and complete, and all of them, each staff member is responsible for following manufacturer documents as written, not substituting local workarounds when instructions are missing or unclear, and not because the rep said. Now there are use limitations which are often overlooked. Manufacturers must clearly state whether something is single use or reusable. Single use, as most of you know, means one use and discard. But the IFU can specify that it is a single use but patient reusable, which means the item may be used multiple times on the same patient, and in most cases does require sterilization between uses. And then, of course, we know our reusable devices are instrument screws and plates. They may be used on multiple patients with validated reprocessing between uses. For reusable devices, validation includes the full cycle: handling and use, point of care use and cleaning, decontamination, assembly, sterilization, and packaging. If the label, IFU, and good ID entry don't match on these points, that's a red flag that has to be resolved. Now, there are specific requirements and best practices for accessories, components, and the role of manufacturer representatives. Every device part number and every accessory must be explicitly covered and identified in the IFU. For our clients, we do associate generic IFUs when appropriate, but we do not assume they are valid across all reference numbers. We work directly with the manufacturer to confirm that the generic instructions truly apply to all of the listed devices, and that any additional assembly or disassembly documents are clearly referenced within the document. A common gap we find is point of care cleaning or point of use instructions. These are frequently missing, vague, or incomplete, or have a detergent that the hospital doesn't have access to. When these steps are not clearly described, hospitals cannot confidently meet IFU requirements. For manufacturer reps, this expectation under ISO 13485 is that they only provide controlled version documents, not informal field practice. No texted photos of pages. No, this is the way we usually do it. No, what about surgeons' preferences? They must confirm the revision and date of the IFU and escalate any gaps or questions through their internal quality systems. Hospitals, in turn, should rely on controlled and manufactured documents, not verbal only guidance. This is where the UDI, or unique device identification, really comes into conversation. People often say, we've always used the reference number. Why change? We're not asking anyone to stop using reference numbers. They're useful operationally. The issue that we have is reference numbers are not unique across manufacturers. For example, two different companies can use the same or similar identical catalog or reference numbers. The UDI, on the other hand, is a globally unique identifier that combines the device identifier, the UDI-DI, and production identifiers, the UDI-PI. It is tied to specific model version number and production information, and it must be registered in the Good ID for US distribution. The Good ID is not just a registration table, it's where you see discrete critical attributes used during value analysis and in clinical workflows, whether device is, again, single use, reusable, whether it must be reprocessed prior to use, if it has any MRI safety status, latex status, packaging levels, or whether it is cleared via 510 or PMA approval process. In our tools, all of this appears on a single screen. The UDI and the Good ID record together form the backbone of device identity and traceability, and they are becoming central to how we safely select, use, document, and monitor medical devices. In today's world, it is imperative for hospitals to identify where UDIs are currently being captured, if at all, and whether those are being captured consistently across departments. Then they need to evaluate the quality of that data. Are the scans accurate? Are the DIs and PI elements being stored? And is there any manual reconstruction happening? And that shouldn't be necessary. We encourage hospitals to map their capture points, document gaps, and prioritize risks, high risk or implantable devices for improvement first. But if they really feel that they should prioritize high risk or implantable devices for improvement first if they feel their existing systems can't handle scanning devices. A key principle is that the UDI should be scannable and not require building it by hand, or the system should be able to capture and associate that UDI into documentation, into inventory, and into any clinical records. This is where ONC certified EHR technology comes into play. The requirement for implantable device documentation has been in place for years and requires certified EHR technology to capture and parse 12 specific UDI elements into the clinical record for implantable devices. That includes MRI safety information, so that when you look at a patient's record, you see the complete picture, the device, its identifiers, its safety profile, and its relationship to that patient. Many EHR and supply chain systems still can't process the full UDI natively, which is why middleware like Xcelrate UDI's UDI clearinghouse is often needed. The goal is harmonization. EHR, supply chain, and inventory systems each need to be able to accept and use UDI data, and where these systems cannot, Xcelrate UDI and UDI clearinghouse bridges that gap. From a quality standpoint, CAPA sits on the top of this. When there are documentation issues, labeling discrepancies, UDI or Good ID mismatches, or device failures, CAPA is required under ISO 13485 and QMSR. That means documenting the issue, investigating root cause, implementing corrective and preventive actions, and verifying those actions were effective. Everyone who works with medical devices, biologics, or drugs that involve a device component need to understand the requirements to follow current validated manufacturer instructions. That includes all staff and patient care and procedure areas, to clinical leadership, supply chain, infection prevention, and quality. Education is about more than showing where the IFU is. It means understanding why we can't guess why we can't rely on another hospital's practice, and why verbal-only instructions from a rep are not considered compliant. CAPA is the formal structure that takes us from we found a problem to we fixed and prevented reoccurrence. When IFUs are incomplete, UDI data is wrong, or documentation conflicts with labeling or good ID, that is not just an annoyance, it's a CAPA event and is an ISO 13485 QMSR world. So given what we've discussed so far, what should you expect from a compliant manufacturer? For devices, they should be correctly registered in the FDA systems, including the establishment registration and good ID, with an accurate device identifier. Packaging levels, descriptions, labels, and good ID data should match. For documentation, they should be current version and include every device or part number it applies to, along with complete point of use, cleaning, inspection, sterilization steps based on validated cycles. For risk management and post-market surveillance, it should be visible through how manufacturers handle complaints, failures, and IFU updates. For manufacturer reps, you should expect controlled IFUs, verified versions, and no off-the-record instructions. That's what ISO 13485 asks of them. From a procurement and value analysis perspective, when evaluating a device, the team needs to verify that the IFU can be followed and list each device number, that good ID data is correct, that chemical use limitations and designations, single use for example, are clearly stated, and that any required consumables or equipment are available and compatible with your workflows. Cycle times and point of use requirements must be achievable with your staffing and equipment. If the instructions require capabilities you don't have, or if the IFU is contradictory, that should be a stop signal in the value analysis process. The device might look good clinically or financially, but if the documentation doesn't support compliant use, it is not a good choice under ISO 13485 or QMSR. So let's talk readiness for this important change. On February 2nd, 2026, the FDA's QMSR rule becomes fully enforceable, and ISO 13485 effectively becomes the U.S. quality system baseline for medical devices. The 2024-25 period is closing rapidly, and that was a window for assessments, remediation, and alignment, and for conducting UDI data assessments, harmonizing systems, educating stakeholders, and tightening CAPA and the documentation process. On the manufacturer side, Good ID has already been in full effect for all devices, all classifications, including Class 1 devices being the last group to require UDI and Good ID listing, and some consumer products remaining exempt only if they have been established by the FDA. And finally, Xcelrate UDI is here to help. As an ONC certified vendor, our solutions are designed to ensure patient safety and regulatory compliance with medical devices, biologics, and consumables. Our solution suite includes UDI Verify, which is automating the data capture, validation of documentation of medical devices and biologics. UDI Vitals is streamlining the tracking and management of biologics for chain of custody for tissue, vaccines, etc. And then IFU Vitals, ensuring you have the latest validated manufacturer documents, the IFUs, the manuals for medical devices, biologics, and drugs. And UDI Clearinghouse, our reporting and data analytics hub, capturing all scannable activity, inventory use, alerts for recalls, expired items, and enables adverse event reporting. In addition to our product suite, we are strategic operational partners to our clients. We go beyond improving patient safety and compliance. We work on our clients' behalf to engage with manufacturers to resolve incomplete, incorrect, and unclear IFU documentation so that their staff can focus on their efforts on providing quality care their patients need and deserve. We also have created 2 brand-free customizable documents to support hospital readiness with ISO 13485, QMSR, implementation. One is the hospital operational readiness and value analysis checklist, which is designed to evaluate your new and existing medical devices against the standards. And then the manufacturer VAR compliance response form, designed as a formal acknowledgement from manufacturers or VARs to confirm their device documentation and regulatory status meets QMSR and ISO 13485 standards. A QR code will be provided at the end of this presentation to download these critical tools. And finally, Xcelrate UDI is always available to our clients who need assistance reviewing IFUs, good ID entries, documentation gaps, or contract language around documentation and shelf life. And now we will pause for a brief Q&A. If you have a question, please submit them in the chat or use the Q&A feature. While we're doing that, let's review some of the key FAQs and takeaways. Number one, what is the single most important deadline that manufacturers and hospitals need to focus on right now? The critical date is February 2nd, 2026. This is when the new QMSR fully replaces the old quality system regulation. As of this date, manufacturers must adhere to the principles of ISO 13485 2016. While this is a manufacturer deadline, it empowers your hospital. If their documentation is non-compliant, you have the regulatory backing to reject or suspend the use of that device at your facility. Number two, how does the shift from ISO 13485 affect my sterile processing department directly? Well, ISO 13485 requires meticulous documentation for reprocessing. If an IFU is missing steps for cleaning, rinsing, inspection, sterilization, or drying, or is vague, or has contradictory instructions, the device is not compliant and puts your SPD department at high risk. This alignment gives the SPD the leverage it needs to demand complete, validated IFUs from the manufacturer. Number three, we struggle with missing or incorrect UDI data. Is that an operational or a compliance issue? Well, it's actually both. The UDI, good ID, integrity is the core compliance mechanism for traceability under the new QMSR. Operationally, poor UDI data, the device and or product information, means you cannot accurately link a device to its correct current IFU, a patient record, or post-market surveillance or recalls. A primary readiness step is performing a UDI data readiness assessment to ensure your EHR, your inventory, and supply chain systems can accurately capture and utilize the full UDI. If you are struggling to capture this data effectively within your system, Xcelrate UDI can help capture UDI data and can help fix missing and incorrect UDI data on your facility's behalf. Number four, if a manufacturer's representative gives us verbal instructions that contradicts the printed IFU, what should you do? I had this happen today, actually. Under ISO 13485 and QMSR principles, verbal guidance that contradicts a validated document is unacceptable and non-compliant. The manufacturer is responsible for providing a validated control IFU with a revision date. Your policies should be to reject verbal guidance and escalate documentation gaps immediately, as the device may not be safe or compliant to use. Only follow the manufacturer's controlled printed documentation, or you can actually view the PDF. We recognize this can be challenging to manage for most hospitals, and so Xcelrate UDI takes on this responsibility for our clients on behalf of our clients. And it is a standard part of our regular service. So our clients' hospital staff can focus on their time and resources on providing quality care and their workflow. Number five, what is the most immediate step we can take in the next few weeks? Well, start with an internal assessment of your device documentation process. Use the hospital's operational readiness and value analysis checklist we provided today to review your 5 most frequent reprocessing or implanted devices. Specifically, check the IFU against the required fields: validated cleaning, inspection, sterilization, cycles, post-sterilization drying time. This gap analysis will highlight your most urgent manufacturer accountability issues. And I'm going to pause for any questions.
Hi, Joan. Great job walking through those. It doesn't look like we have any additional questions or comments, so you can continue to the next slide.
Okay. Thank you. As we close, we invite you to contact us on our website at xcelrateudi.com to schedule a free demo of how Xcelrate UDI can optimize your IFU management and regulatory compliance goals. Additionally, if you're interested in our QMSR ISO readiness checklist, please scan that barcode on your screen, and we will provide you a copy of the we will also provide copies of this presentation to all who attend, and you can share it with others who are unable to attend. Thank you all so much for your time today. Happy holidays. Thank you for your commitment to patient safety, and have an amazing day.